nothing will go wrong in that sense. Okay, hello. Welcome, my name is Michaela, this is Meekela Reads, I live here. Today, oh boy, I read a lot, we know this already, but I also buy a lot of books, and despite the fact that I read 99 books last year, I still ended the year with more books on my TBR than I started. So grab a cuppa, grab a snack, because we're going to be here for a while I tell you about the 70 plus books that I own and haven't read yet. And I'm doing this so that it makes me more accountable for actually reading them this year. I will be relying heavily on the internet for this because I bought some of these books a really long time ago. I don't remember why I bought them and I don't remember the synopsis. Also, disclaimer, I have not read these books, obviously. I potentially am gonna get the synopses wrong because A, it's my interpretation of what I've read on the internet about the synopses. B, I'm a human and I'm imperfect. And C, I'm trying to synopsize more than 70 books. So please be kind to me. I will rectify myself when I read the books. Eventually. So we have 70 books to talk about. Let's just talk about them because otherwise we're going to be here forever. We are starting with the book that I think is the book that I've had on my shelf for the longest time. The Old Kingdom Chronicles by Garth Nix. This book is the size of my head, literally. I count this as 3 books because it is. It is a bind up of 3 different books. This is a series, obviously, by Garth Nix. I believe in the first one we're following Sabriel, and there is some kind of magic to do with bells. It is death magic and they're trying to keep the dead dead, and her mentor slash father goes missing and his name is Abhorsen. He is the Abhorsen? Not too clear on that. I'm pretty sure there's more of them in the series now. At the time, these were the 3 that were out then. 1,000 Splendid Suns by Khaled Hosseini. This is my 3rd Hosseini book that I will have read. This is another book that is set in Afghanistan, in Kabul. Reading the back of it, I can tell that Mariam is 15 when she's sent to Kabul. She marries someone and then 2 decades later, they take in a teenager named Layla. And then the Taliban come in and it's another historical fiction set in that setting and time, as with the other Khaled Hosseini works, which I really enjoyed. So I'm hoping I enjoyed this one as much as well. A Wild Sheep Chase by Haruki Murakami, which is a book that I bought on the recommendation of Carrie before she became a booktuber. It has been on my TBR for a very long time. I have since read The Elephant Vanishes, which is the short story collection, which I didn't love. But then I've also proceeded to pick up 2 more of his books anyway. I've also just learned that this is book 3 in the series. 2018 Michaela was unhinged in her book buying. I wanted Kafka on the Shore, I couldn't just leave Norwegian Wood, so I picked up both. Norwegian Wood is a 60s themed novel following 2 friends as they're managing the death of their 3rd friend, I believe, but it's also a Murakami book, so I'm assuming there's some element of magical realism thrown in there as well. And then Kafka on the Shore is the one that I actually wanted to read, which is a dual perspective magical realism, but I could not synopsize this for the life of me, so bonus points if you can do that for me. These Farm Delights by Chloe Gong. This is a Romeo and Juliet based historical fiction fantasy retelling set in 1920s Shanghai. This was popular a hot minute ago. I'm pretty sure the 4th book or something just came out, so we'll get there eventually. Hidden Valley Road by Robert Kolker. This is a non-fiction following a family where half of the 12 children have been diagnosed with schizophrenia, and it follows all of the testing and the results that came as a result of that. I have actually already started this and I was enjoying myself. It did take a lot of my brain power, but I can tell that this is going to be incredibly interesting. I was just interrupted by readathons and other videos that I had to read books for, but this is high on my priority list for 2023. 6 Crimson Cranes by Elizabeth Lim. This follows our main character Shiori. I'm pretty sure she's a princess and she has some secret powers, and she's betrothed to be married. However, on her wedding day her powers explode. Her evil stepmother, who also has secret magic powers, puts a curse on her, banishes her, and turns her 6 brothers into cranes, and she has to find the brothers. I'm pretty sure there will not be a time that I speak about this book that I do not gush about this cover. I love it so much. It is getting hot. I'm pretty sure it's like more than 30 degrees today here. So, alright, we need to rapid fire this now. The Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. This was published in 2015. I have nearly unhauled this many times. I still am unsure if I will actually unhaul it because I have little to no interest in actually reading it. Maybe this is the year that I'll make up my mind and decide whether or not I will read it or get rid of it. As far as I know, it is a fantasy series with a female main character, so I can only assume the tropes and the plot that will occur in this book. You can start to see my little tower that I'm building. Ace of Spades by Farida Abike Imide. A book set in a private school setting that's a fiction thriller that's giving some really strong Gossip Girl vibes. Essentially following 2 main characters and someone who's out to get them. We Hunt the Flame by Hassa Faisal. This was one of my most anticipated books for last year and I didn't read it. And I literally cannot remember the synopsis to save my life. It's a dual perspective fantasy as two important people go looking for the same artifact, but the journey becomes dangerous and I can only assume that they fall in love because it's a fantasy. Jade City by Fonda. Another very well loved and known booktube fantasy series. It's book 1 in the Greenbone saga. It is a political fantasy, something to do with jade gives people superhuman powers and only the rich have the jade or more of the jade. Okay, pile number 2. What are we at? 14 books so far. You've Reached Sam by Dustin Tao. A book I bought because I assumed it was going to make me sad. So Goodreads says 17-year-old Julie has a future planned out, move out of her small town with her boyfriend Sam, attend college in the city, spend a summer in Japan, but then Sam dies and everything changes. Next, The Ruby Circle by Rochelle Mead. Possibly the book that's been on my shelf for the second longest. This is the last book in the Bloodline series, which is a spin-off of the Vampire Academy series, which I am currently rereading so that I can read this series to get this off my shelf. There's the good vampires, the bad vampires, the half vampires, and the humans with weird vampire blood magic tattoos that give them special powers. Eliza and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappiel. This is another YA book that I bought a long time ago and have likely grown out of already. Eliza's got an online personality, a fanfiction or a webcomic of some type, but it's got some cool pictures. Then we have Saga. I have not read this yet. This is currently standing as the only graphic novel on my TBR as well, which I am sad about. This is set among a space war. We find ourselves with two soldiers who have fallen in love and they have a child. They then have to protect their family from either side of this space war that's going on. The Mistborn trilogy by Brandon Sanderson. To be honest, I'm actually just so intimidated by the series and Brandon Sanderson in general because fantasies make me stressed. I think this has to do with a heist, some criminals, set in a very broken world, question mark? We'll see what happens. The Book of Immortality by Adam Leith Goldner. Can you believe that I have had this on my TBR for longer than I've had this channel and only today have I looked up the synopsis for this book? I genuinely actually think I bought this as a joke with one of my friends, but here we are, it's still here. This is actually a non-fiction exploring the content and concept of immortality and all of its themes across religion and mythology in the past. I don't know, I might read it, I might give it a go. It would be a good diverse read. Why do I even own this? Ava Evergreen, Semi-Magical Witch. It's a middle grade. We follow Ava Evergreen as she is trying to become a novice witch before she turns 13. Otherwise, I think she loses her powers. I'm really hoping that this is a really lovely, cozy middle grade that's going to provide me with the same feelings that like The House in the Cerulean Sea did, just without all of the problematic author stuff. Many Robin Hobbs to talk about. Let's just run through them all rapid fire. Number 1, Assassin's Apprentice. This follows Fitz. He has powers. He can talk to animals and he gets adopted into the royal household. The Dragon Keeper, number 1 in the Rainwild series. We follow people as they're transporting dragons somewhere in a setting that I don't know because I haven't read the prerequisite books for that. And Live Ship 1, 2, and 3. Ships made of sentient wood. Ships become sentient. Ships have to sail across the Rainwild River for a reason. I think it's trade. Don't quote me on that. I, again, have not read the prerequisite books, nor do I know anything about the series. Moving on from Robin Hobb. A Man Called Ove by Frederick Bachman. This is a heartwarming friendship story. We follow a curmudgeonly old man, Ove. He is just living his life in this neighborhood, but his world's kind of turned upside down once he has some really young, bubbly neighbors move in next door, and they kind of disrupt the peace of his life. Okay, we're at 29. A Torch Against the Night by Sabaa Tahir. This is book 2 in an Ember in the Ashes series. I read An Ember in the Ashes last year, towards the end of the year. I really enjoyed it. It is a very brutal dual perspective story with many different components that are happening all at the same time. Obviously, I won't tell you what's going to happen in the second one. I don't know what's going to happen in the second one, but I do know in the first one it is a sort of political, sort of magical story with romance and death and betrayal and all of the good things that you want in a fantasy YA series. Take Me Home Tonight by Morgan Matson. This is a YA contemporary following two friends in New York City at nighttime. It spans the course of 24 hours, I believe, or just nighttime. Hijinks, friendship ensues. I assume that there's love because it's a contemporary YA book, but the two friends have to find their way back to Grand Central Station by midnight for a reason. I'm hoping that this one, because it spans such a short amount of time, that the pace is going to be fast and it will keep me invested, because spoiler, I've already read Since You've Been Gone, which is another one that was on my TBR at the start of this year. It was slow and long, so I'm hoping that this one is good. Since You've Been Gone is another Morgan Matson that I picked up at a secondhand store, and I did just finish reading this, but it's included in this video because it started the year on my TBR. There's 3 of them interspersed into this video. We follow Emily. She has been left a list of things to do by her best friend who has gone missing for the summer, and Emily tries to complete the list in hopes that she finds her best friend at the end of it, of everything. Daughter of Smoke and Bone by Laini Taylor. This is another BookTube OG series that I never read at the time. I have read Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor and I enjoyed it. This one gives me more like witchy vibes. It sounds like a darkish YA fantasy. I believe we have 2 main characters. One's got blue hair. There's a star-crossed love involved. Witchy things are happening, like people are buying out teeth and bones and then things are being drawn on doors. It's given me the dark YA fantasy vibes, which is what I'm more after. Speaking of dark fantasy, Gideon the Ninth, the new darker shade of magic on my shelf. Lesbian Necromancers. I believe this is a story we follow Gideon. Gideon is trying to leave their life, however, their nemesis Harrow is not letting them do that. Am I sensing an enemies to lovers? I really hope so. The Gilded Wolves by Roshani Chokshi. I bought this for a video that I was going to do that I never released. However, I kept the book because I've heard that the book is great. This is set in 1889 and follows a treasure hunter. But again, we have a journey to find an artifact. You know the tropes, you know the drill. I'm excited. I don't have a lot of fantasies like this on my shelf, like the heist, treasure hunting type books. Magician by Raymond E. Weiss. In this we follow Pug. He is studying as an apprentice for a quite famous and well-known magician, Colgan. This is another one that I actually started last year. I started listening to it on audiobook. However, all of the chapter files were out of order, so it was just really confusing because I couldn't listen to the chapters in order, nor did I know what order the chapters were supposed to go in because I haven't read the book. So one second I was listening to chapter 2 and then I was on chapter 14 and I didn't know how I got there. It's just so intimidating. Look at the size of this and look at the size of the words on the page. It's not even an easy one. Under the Whispering Door by TJ Klune. This one follows a man who has died and he is given 7 days by someone on the other side to live a full life within those 7 days before he passes over. V. Schwab said, I loved it, like being wrapped up in a big gay blanket. Lies of Loch Lamora by Scott Lynch. Another high fantasy. Fun fact, I got this book in my first book haul that I ever did, which is my first video on this channel. You can no longer watch it, but I know that it's there. We follow a young mercenary, Locke, as he's trying to protect his little mercenary life as bigger bads are threatening the structure to his society. Time Salvager and Time Siege. I got these as a gift from a family member. I have no idea what this is about. I don't even know if I'm interested in it. I just don't have the capacity to say no to people when I don't want to let them down. As far as I know, it's a sci-fi series. It includes time travel and then all of the politics and things that go along with having a society that is based with time travel. Shadow's Edge and Beyond the Shadows. Okay, so there's a high possibility that I might actually unhaul these. Jury's still out. Feel free to convince me either way. But I read The Way of Shadows. It is a fantasy and he learns how to become an assassin. Alright, much like the Twilight Saga's Breaking Dawn, this video comes to you in 2 parts. Before my camera battery died and now. Girls of Paper and Fire by Natasha Nan, another book that I bought for the purpose of a video that I never put out. But this is a fantasy. It follows 8 girls who are hand selected by the king every year from the paper caste, which is the lowest of the caste system, to be paper girls. However, our main character is not like other girls and is apparently instead made of fire. And I Darken by Kirsten White, another BookTube OG that I never read. This is a gender bend reimagining of a historical fiction. That is literally all I know about it. Young Michaela was not particular about her book purchases and had way too much faith in online influencers. The Black Witch by Laurie Forrest. Another witch book. Very exciting. This is a subgenre of fantasy that I really enjoy and have not read enough of. We follow Elorin, who has no powers as a witch, however is the descendant of a very well-known, very powerful witch, the Black Witch. However, she attends some kind of schooling and this actually backfires on her because it's actually not a good thing for her to be a descendant of the Black Witch. The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave. This is a mystery thriller. I picked this up at a secondhand bookshop last year. I believe it follows a woman. Her husband has died, but he had left a note essentially saying that she needs to take care of his child from a previous marriage. However, in doing this, she actually uncovers that he has a bunch of secrets and he is not who she thought he was, so this book follows her figuring out who he actually was. The Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Once again, intimidating. This is book 1 in what is meant to be like a more than 10 book series. This is number 1 of the the Stormlight Archives, and I'm now cursed because the rest of the series needs to be in this cover. I got this from a secondhand bookstore, and so I'm aware that I will never find all of them with these covers. This is a fantasy series whose magic system is surrounded by weapons and armor that gives people supernatural powers or turns them into invincible warriors. The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. We follow an autistic main character. She hires an escort to teach her how to be better at sex after a co-worker insinuates that she is not good at that. We have fake dating. We have Who Did This to You? We have all of the adorable, lovely, quirky tropes all within one book. This is another one of the ones that I have already read this year, but it started the year on my TBR. Babel by R.F. Kuang. We know she didn't like the Poppy War. However, I'm hoping that this being dark academia will be more up my alley. This is a very well-loved new release, Dark Academia by R.F. Kuang. You know more about this than I do, probably, but essentially what I've heard is that it's Jonathan Strange, Mr. Norrell, and The Secret History combined into one. Both of which I own, neither of which I've read. So on that vein, The Secret History by Donna Tartt. We follow a group of people at college under the instruction of one teacher as they spiral down the lines of morality towards evil. I think there's a murder. There's always a murder in Dark Academia. And Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. This is set in 1800. We follow Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, both of which who are magicians who are polar opposites of each other as they enter some kind of magical war between each other for a reason that I do not know. Another Brandon Sanderson. This is Skyward by Brandon Sanderson. I'm currently reading this. This is going to be awful if I don't actually like him as an author. This is the first in his sci-fi series. We follow main character Spencer. She wants to be a pilot in this world where humans essentially have been displaced and are under constant threat from an alien species called the Krell. Tales from the Cafe and Before Your Memory Fades by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. This is books 2 and 3 in the Before the Coffee Gets Cold series. I have already read Tales from the Cafe. This is the third one in the stack. But this one essentially just gives us more stories about the cafe and the people that are working there and actually how the magic of the cafe works as well. And Before Your Memory Fades, again, more stories from the cafe of Funicula. Warcraft Archive. This is essentially a collection of 4 stories from the lore of World of Warcraft. Have I ever had anything to do with World of Warcraft? No. Jared has a lot though, so this is for him. I bought this to satisfy his want of me to read World of Warcraft. The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness. This is number 1 in the Chaos Walking series. This was turned into a movie starring Tom Holland. This is a sci-fi dystopian, I believe. We follow a town of men as they have the capacity to hear what each other are thinking. We follow Todd. He is a boy and he runs into a girl whose mind he cannot read. The Girl Who Fell Beneath the Sea by Axio. This was one of my most anticipated for last year. Again, mostly because of the beautiful cover. Can we take a minute for the cover? This is a fiction in which we follow a city. Every year sacrifice a young woman to the sea god to become his maiden. However, our main character Mina's brother's girlfriend gets sacrificed, and so he jumps in to save her, and then Mina has to go in to save him. Seems cool. Gracelink by Kirsten Kershaw. We follow Katza. Her grace or power thing is being able to kill people by touching them. She is the niece of the king, so essentially he uses her to do all of his dirty work. However, obviously there's complications with touching people and them dying, so I think that's going to cause some strife in relationships as well. Hotel Magnifique by Emily J. Taylor. This is a book that is supposed to be essentially a crossover of like Caraval and the Night Circus. I bought this for a book club last year, and by the time I was going to get to read it 2 days before I had to for the book club, everyone had already read it and said that it was bad, so I didn't want to read it. So essentially it combines the mystical roaming hotel similar to the Night Circus while also having a darker element of unbreakable contracts, much like Caraval. The 5th seasons 1, 2 and 3. This is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. She really has a thing for buying series from authors that she doesn't like. This is a super popular and well-loved fantasy series. I read The City We Became and I didn't like it, so I'm hoping once again, different genre, hopefully I like it a bit more. The Wisteria Society of Lady Scoundrels and The League of Gentlewomen Witches. Now, I have this as an ebook on my e-reader, and I have that because it was meant for a book club that I was meant to read last year. This is becoming a theme, and I went to buy it and I accidentally bought book 2 instead, so now I have both and I haven't read either of them. A prim and proper lady thief must save her aunt from a crazed pirate and his dangerously charming henchman in this fantastical historical romance. I think there's also floating houses, so I'm in. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. The one, the only original fantasy book. Do I need to tell you the synopsis of Frankenstein? I'm not going to. Burn by Patrick Ness. A family of outcasts in a town have to hire a dragon to help them out on the farm. But also assassins, but also the FBI, but also a cult. I'm always in for the ride for Patrick Ness's works. I have Shantaram by Gregory David Roberts, and I'm of two minds about this. Number one, the size of it. Number two, the fact that this is only book one in whatever series that this is. This is a fiction following a person who is incarcerated, flees to Bombay, gets involved in the underworld, and then some other things happen. And I say that this is a fiction because it is stupidly similar to the author's own experience of being arrested in Melbourne, fleeing from the prison in Melbourne, escaping to India, and getting involved in an underground syndicate, opening a medical institution for people in like the underground syndicate, and then being captured and then re-imprisoned back in Australia. Earthsea by Ursula Le Guin. This is technically 4 books. So I'm counting this as 4 books because I will be reading them as 4 books. This is the Earthsea quartet to start with. It consists of A Wizard of Earthsea, The Tombs of Tuin, The Father Shore, and Ten Hao. This is another classic fantasy trope-filled book. Boy is orphaned, boy has powers, boy goes to magical school to learn how to use said powers. I picked this one up because it supposedly influenced Patrick Rothfuss in writing The Name of the Wind, which is one of my favorite fantasy series of all time. From Lukov with Love by Mariana Zapata. This is a classic smut-filled romance based in ice skating. We follow our main character as her 17-year ice skating career is coming to a close and she has to learn to deal with that, but obviously it's a romance. The size of it is putting me off. It is a 450-page romance book, which is a bit much in my opinion, but I'm in for the ride. I'm excited to see where we go with it. The Lesbiana's Guide to Catholic School is a highly anticipated one for me. We follow Yamilet as she is not only the only Mexican girl at her Catholic school, but she is also secretly gay. I believe she's outed, moves to a new school, and then has to pretend to be straight. However, this becomes really hard when she starts to fall for the other person who is openly gay at her school. Adorable. I've heard great things. I'm genuinely really excited for this one. The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. Another very popular TikTok book. This is Dark Academia. We follow a secret society that choose 6 new people to go on a year-long test to see whether or not they're going to be initiated into the secret society. However, only 5 of the 6 get through. As the Lemon Trees Go by Zulfa Katu. This was a late release last year, but everyone has loved it. This is a historical fiction magical realism, I believe. Our main character also has some kind of manifestation of her PTSD, I believe, and he is depicted as a bloody man. Though I'm learning that the historical fiction is not usually my jam, I've heard enough people talk about this one that it convinced me. Magic Steeped in Poison by Judy Lin. Can we take a minute for the cover? This is book number 1 in the Book of Tea series, which, how delightful does that sound? Our main character accidentally poisons her sister, and her only chance for saving her sister is to enter a competition in which she essentially tests to become the best tea brewer that there is. Book 2 just came out, which is really timely, and so I'm really excited to get to this one. It's another one that I wish that I had read last year, but thus time did not allow me to. And finally, we made it to the end. Ice Planet Barbarians. This is exactly what you think it is. Smutty, barbarian, monster romance. It has its purpose. I will not justify myself for this purchase. And that is it. Look, we made it through. We had some lighting changes. We had some time changes. Everything is fine. We made it to the end. We came out the end with 76 books, which is 3 more than my TBR started with last year. How does that math work out? I do not know. But that's my TBR. Let me know if any of these are also on your TBRs. Please tell me I'm not the only one that is super far behind on all of these books, but also not the only one that has this many unread books on her shelf. But I'm aware that you've probably been listening to me ramble about this for a very long time. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you're having a fantastic day or night or whatever time it is where you are in the world, and I will see you next week. Goodbye.